Hello, this is Frank Falvey with Frank Presents. And today my great pleasure of having Frank Crimmins, who is running for the Governor's Council of Massachusetts.
Thanks, Frank.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
What is the history and what does the Governor's Council of Massachusetts do?
The Governor's Council was put in the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780. And it was put in there to make sure there was a check and balance on the elected governor's powers, to make sure we didn't turn our governor into a king. Because, as you know, we had broken away from Great Britain and we were trying to get away from the power of an unchecked king. So in the Constitution of 1780, I have a copy of the Constitution here. And as you know, that Constitution preceded the U.S. Constitution by 7 years. We had what was then called an executive council to be made up of 8 members, one from 8 different districts across the state, to make sure that there was a group to give their advice and consent to any nominees made by a governor for the judicial branch of government. Now, as you know, at that time, there was no other country in the world that had 3 branches of government. There was no other country in the world that had an independent branch for a judiciary. We did in Massachusetts because of John Adams and the Founding Fathers. So there was an executive council to make sure there was advice and consent. So that is the role that is applied today. The executive council has come to be known as the Governor's Council, but those 8 members give advice and consent. So by way of analogy, you know that when the President of the United States nominates somebody to the United States Supreme Court or an inferior court, that nominee has to go for their advice and consent before the Senate, because the Constitution of the United States, which I carry around with me all the time, that I also believe in, provides for that. And you know that if someone gets a majority vote of the Senate, they get confirmed. They go on after being sworn in to take their seat on the whatever court they have been nominated for. So because we were one of the 13 original colonies, we didn't have a U.S. Constitution to go by. So they came up with the idea of
the
this.
U.S. Constitution came by John Adams in the way of the Massachusetts Constitution.
That's right. That's right. So the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780 preceded this one by 7 years. And Massachusetts can make great claim to that. Of course, the people in the Commonwealth of Virginia say their Constitution was the leading, template for the U.S. Constitution. But that Constitution that we had preceded the U.S. Constitution, so we had this Executive Council. And to this day, the Executive Council that became known as the Governor's Council gives advice and consent for the governor's nominees for appointments to the bench, judgeships, clerks, magistrate positions, the people that run courts. It gives powers over commutations and pardons, awesome power reserved to the governor, right? And it has power over appointing people to the Appellate Tax Board, to the Department of Industrial Accidents or the Workers' Comp judges, as well as approving warrants to the State Treasury. So that is what the Governor's Council is. There are 8 members of the Governor's Council. There are 8 districts. When you take the population of the Commonwealth, which is in excess of 7 million legal residents, you divide by 8. There are over 900,000 people in each district. So I'm running for a seat in District 2. And that district has over 900,000 residents, and it's made up of 37 different communities in the Commonwealth.
You mentioned pardons.
Yes.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought you just nominated the judges or approved the nomination of people that sit on the pardon board. Is that correct? That you don't directly have any say in an individual's pardon or commutation?
No, the governor is going to make that recommendation for a pardon or commutation. It gets approved by the Governor's Council.
All right. The Governor's Council is not appointing judges that they then give the approval to. The Governor's Council itself is giving the recommendation or approving the pardon?
No, there will be the Governor's Council acting as the advisory board for that will give their advice and consent, and then the Board of Pardons will make that decision.
All right. So there is another step that the Governor's Council, it's not just from the Governor to the Governor's Council. It's the Governor to the Governor's Council that makes a recommendation individually to the pardon board?
Well, the Governor's Council is going to approve the Governor's nominees for the Board of Pardons.
Right.
Right.
That's what.
Yes.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, the other point I'd like to clarify is that in the U.S. Constitution, the senators act as advice and consent, and a senator can hold up a nomination all by himself or herself.
Only because of the rules of the Senate.
Correct. The Governor's Council can't do that.
No.
The Governor's Council must vote one way or the other on the recommendation of the governor.
Yes. Yeah. They will conduct a hearing, and if someone gets a majority vote, it goes forward. And if the Governor's Council is 4-4, the Lieutenant Governor will break the tie.
Who is the chair of the Governor's Council?
Yes.
The Lieutenant Governor
Yes.
is the chair of the Governor's Council.
So right now that would be Kim Driscoll.
Right. So in a tie vote and a 4-4 vote, she would get to make the decision.
Yes.
What is your educational work experience background leading you up to qualify you to be a candidate?
I'm a lawyer by profession. I was a lawyer for almost 11 years before Governor Weld appointed me as a district court judge in 1992. I served as a district court judge from 1992 to 2010. My duties included, at that time, I was a acting first justice at the Fall River District Court around 95 and 96. I served on the appellate division of the district court for 4 or 5 years. In 2001, I became the first justice of the Stoughton District Court. I served as the first justice of the Stoughton District Court from 2001 to 2010. And then I retired from that position because my wife and I have 4 kids. They were doing the college thing. Like a lot of people, I had to make a pivot because my wife was tied up with health care issues for parents, and I needed to make more money, so I left the bench, and I went back into private practice. I did a little short timeout in municipal government where I took a position as town manager in the town of Stoughton. I served there from 2010 to 2012. I left there voluntarily, back into private practice, returned in 2014 to town of Avon, where I was their town administrator. I served as town administrator in Avon from 2014 to 2018. Back in private practice, I founded a firm when I left the bench in 2010. We do business as Ab Initio Elder Law Solutions. It's an estate planning and elder law practice where I do that to this day. My political involvement, most recently before this position, I was appointed by then Governor Baker in 2022 to be the chairman of the State Ballot Law Commission. I served on that until 2024, earlier this year, where I resigned from that so I could run for this. And so, you know, I grew up in Stoughton, Mass. I went to Xaverian Brothers High School with a lot of kids from Franklin. I was lucky enough after getting out of high school to get a scholarship to go to Harvard College. When I got out of college, I wanted to make sure, I wanted to be a lawyer. I try to figure out how to do that. So like a lot of people, I went to law school nights. I was lucky enough to get into Suffolk University evening division. I worked days at my father's real estate and insurance business. I went to law school nights. I got out in '81, passed the bar, got active in community affairs, political affairs, civic affairs, fraternal affairs. In 1982, I was elected to the Stoughton Board of Selectmen. They called it Board of Selectmen then. It's now a select board, right? But Board of Selectmen, I served there from '82 to '85.
All right.
'85, I ran for moderator.
Okay. Let me ask this. There is a lot of paperwork that the judges need to fill out, probably depending on what type of judge they are, whether they're an appeals judge or a superior court or a workman's comp.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a lot of background material that is generated. Am I correct in that?
Oh, sure.
Lots of it.
Sure.
Some of it revolves around ethics.
Sure.
There is a state law that says that judges and anyone working for the state or on a state board has to take an ethics test.
Yes.
They can't fail the ethics test.
I agree. I got 100 every time.
Right. So did everyone else.
That's right.
Right. Ethically, I think that's unconstitutional for elected officials because we're imposing a certain criteria, okay, that is outside of just the people electing them. We're putting another qualification. And it's $100 a day penalty if you don't take that test. Now, someone could challenge that. Do you believe that judges should have to take that ethics test?
It is my understanding that I can't remember a time where I took that test as a judge. I took that test when I was a state employee. I don't remember ever taking that as a judge. Maybe I did, but it was so elementary because there was a higher standard this way.
Say I'm wrong, but if that is true, how would you approach that question when judges are before you? Do you think it's appropriate for them to take that test if in fact they do have to take it?
Oh, I don't think a judge has to take that test.
Okay.
Okay, but here's what I believe in. I believe in the Constitution and the separation of the branches of government. I'm not looking for making law on the judicial side. People that are in the judicial branch aren't supposed to be the ones that make the law. The law is already made for them. They apply the facts to the law. They are the ones that uphold the law. So with respect to that question, you are certainly right that you can't even flunk that test. So that test is so, it doesn't even count other than this. Under Chapter 258 of the
But you couldn't have been the town manager without taking the
correct.
test.
I took the test plenty of times in my other roles. I was just saying my judicial role.
Let's change the subject for a moment.
Yeah,
Okay.
when I was a selectman, I had to do it. Moderator, I had to do it. But when I was the town manager, I was saying as a judge.
And as a state rep, you have to do it.
Yes.
So a state rep is elected by the people. Why should they have to take the test? But let's change the subject.
Yeah.
There are different qualifications in my mind for the different positions that you're going to review.
Yes.
How do you separate, or how do you look at the qualifications for whatever position is up before a judge?
Okay. Well, first, even with respect to judgeships, all judicial positions aren't the same. There are 7 trial court departments. So we have a district court that I sat on, and a superior court and appeals court. But then you have a housing court, a land court, juvenile court, probate and family court. There are separate competencies for the people that sit in those positions. So you have to be able to evaluate whether the candidate has the competencies to be successful in those particular trial court departments, number one. You have to view their record to see what they have done to show that they have those competencies in those areas. The type of person that's going to be doing domestic relations divorces isn't the type of person that's going to have the same skill set for somebody on the land court or the housing court, that type of thing. So you have to know that, number one. Then number two, you have to be able to judge whether or not someone has the temperament to be a public servant and to deal with what you have to deal with in those positions. You know, when you talk about someone who's a judge in any one of those courts, the judge comes out in the morning, usually escorted by a court officer that you don't hire, sits on a bench right behind a clerk that is put in there by a clerk magistrate that has life tenure. You know, you have members of the public. The elected DA has the assistant district attorney in the courtroom. Defense has either private counsel or public counsel. You have probation employees that are there under a separate department, separate union. Administrative staff from the clerk's office, separate, union. You have to make it all work, and you have to have the right type of temperament to make it all work, because most times even the building you're in isn't a state-owned building. It's leased from the county, and to even get the lights changed, you got to be able to get a lot of people working together in buying in.
My point is, particularly for the people watching, this just is not about courts, though. It's about workman's comp. It's about land court.
That's right.
It's about other judgeships,
right,
that affect you directly.
That's right.
So your evaluation is going to be different depending on the requirements. Now, let me throw something out to you, right? You have, for, say, a Superior Court justice, two nominees come before you. One's a Harvard graduate, a woman, maybe a second-generation immigrant. The second is a Suffolk Law School graduate, maybe Italian, been here for centuries with his family. Are the things that, just saying those things, that would lead you to kind of favor one more than the other one?
No. I don't care what school they go to. I don't care black, green, brown, red. It's whether or not they have the competency to do the job, and they've shown through their work experience before they got there that they can work with people, have the right temperament, can be a public servant, can work with people and all that.
So the school they graduate from is not going to infer a better education than another one to you?
No.
They're going to be equal no matter where they went to school?
Yes. I'm a graduate of Harvard College undergrad, Suffolk University Law School Evening Division,
right.
Western New England University for Masters in Estate Planning and Elder Law. I've met outstanding people in every one of those institutions. They're all the same to me. It's what you do with it.
And judgeships are a political domino somewhat. In other words, a governor, is going to tend to look for judges of maybe their political party. How does that fit into you when the judges are being recommended by the governor? Are you looking at how close these two individuals are? Are you looking at any political views that the judge coming before you is? And if it was a Republican governor recommending a Republican, would you be looking at the same way you would if it was a Democratic governor with a Democratic nominee?
Wouldn't make a difference to me. And I don't think it made a difference to the last governor either. If you look at the amount of appointments that the Baker administration had, the Baker administration filled more spots on the judicial branch than any other administration. At least 1/3 of the entire bench was nominated and appointed by Governor Charles Baker. He appointed as many Democrats as Republicans. It wasn't a factor. You go for the best person for the job, and you go through the process. That's what the governor, I expect to do, and I am assuming that for this governor. What the council has to do, though, is to make sure the public has a role in it, because when the governor does that, that's done in private. When the governor's committee screens somebody, that's done in private. They don't come on a show like this. It's done in private. When they ask questions of the nominee, that's done in private. No one sees that. The only time you ever get to see a person who might be a judge and sit on a bench for 15 to 30 years is when they come before the governor's council. That's the only time they get a hearing. And it's up to the members of that council to ask the questions so the public has confidence in the system that they are getting the best and brightest to fill those spots.
And would you always support it being televised?
Yes, and here's the thing. I don't want to pander to you because you have your TV show, but it wasn't until COVID where it was televised.
Right.
That was the best thing that ever happened, because until COVID, people didn't know that it was a closed shop and it was done on the quiet, and there weren't a lot of questions. Once COVID hit, they started filming the things. And just like with schools, when people started seeing what happens in schools, when they lifted the curtain and all that, when people started seeing, you could go even now. You could go mass.gov, follow the link, Governor's Council, live streaming, and see the hearings. They weren't asking any questions. And that's the difference now. And if the public saw what was going on, they would want somebody who would ask the questions. They would want some people that would be willing to ask those questions. So the public has some confidence in the people being appointed for those positions, so they're not just political appointments.
What would you be looking for in a resume that's coming before you that might tip you off that you would have a concern about?
I would want to see that a person has been practicing law for a certain amount of time and has had some success in the practice of law, that the people they have dealt with while they have been in the practice of law, if it was a judicial appointment, for example, think well of them, whether they were on the right side or wrong side, but they were very competent in their field, in their area they were going for. I would want to see how they gave something back to their community in whatever role that was, whether it's in the kids' school, whether it's sports, whether it's activities in their community. They showed something about a desire to be a public servant, and whether or not they have had success in that area. And just as importantly is the temperament to deal with the public, because you have to put whatever those personal opinions are that you had before you took the job, and you park it outside the door. Once you take the bench, it doesn't matter what you did before. Judges don't go, like in some states, they don't go to political events. They don't donate to candidates. They can't do those things. There are ethics for judges that are some of the highest in the nation. And because of that...
Not on the Supreme Court.
On which court?
The U.S. Supreme Court is not the highest ethics standard.
I'm talking Massachusetts.
Right.
I'm talking Massachusetts.
Right.
This state has some of the highest, ethics of any place in the country. This state, and that is why it's so important to have that. We don't elect judges.
Let me ask a quick question. You don't have to be an attorney to be on this board.
Correct.
Is there any reason that an attorney should have preference in making a decision who you have on the board?
I think an attorney is much more qualified than a layperson if that attorney practiced law and knew what it took to be a good judge or a good clerk or a good person on the Department of Industrial Accidents or all those other boards. That's what an attorney does. It gets you a ticket to get in the game so you can see that. But just having a degree where you're a Juris Doctorate doesn't make it happen for you. So I don't say that I'm qualified just because I'm an attorney. I practiced law. I was successful at it. I got appointed as a young man to a judgeship. I did that. I was successful at it. I've been in the game for a long time, so I know the difference between what is successful or not.
Frank Crimmins, what is the question I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk to the people about?
No, I just say if people want to have a person who's going to make sure that people that take those positions know this and they know this, the two constitutions, I believe in this. I believe in this. There are, everybody who's a town official in your town, everybody that goes before that governor's council takes an office where they swear to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Commonwealth of Mass. And there are some people that don't abide by what this says, because what this says is everyone's equal that goes in court. It doesn't matter what party you are. You leave that outside the door. And we need to have people that have confidence in the system. And by confidence in the system, people have to know they get a fair shake no matter who they are in court. People have to participate in jury duty. People have to participate if they're a witness to be called as a witness to show up. The Constitution's what's important, the rule of law. We have a divided country here. Our institutions are under attack. One of the institutions under attack is the rule of law. When people lose confidence in the rule of law, we have a lot of tough things that happen that aren't good. I have kids, I have grandkids, they're living up like yours, they're living in a whole different world than the world I grew up in, because that's under attack. So I support the rule of law. I would look to make sure we have the best people that we can to have that, and I give them a fair hearing, and that's what I hope the people will have as a reason to support my candidacy.
Frank, if people want to learn more about you, learn more about your candidacy, or become involved, how can they do that?
Thank you. We have a committee called Committee to Elect Francis T. Crimmins, Jr. That's my legal name, Francis. So Francis T. Crimmins, Jr. We have a website
You
for
have
that.
a middle name?
Thomas. Yeah.
So your legal name is
Francis Thomas Crimmins Jr.
Jr.
Yes, yes, yeah, yep. And we have a campaign committee, and we have electcrimmins.com will get you there. We're on Facebook, and my number's published there. They can go to those sources and find out that. We answer our calls and our emails.
Francis Thomas Crimmins Jr., thank you for being a candidate.
Thank you,
Thank
Frank.
you for putting yourself out there as a qualified individual running for a public office. And I hope if when you get elected, you'll come back and we'll do some more discussion, because if you're not aware that I filmed, and probably is the only one before the TV, actually filmed a session of the Governor's Judicial Council.
Wow, that's great. That's
So,
great.
some way you can see that probably.
Yeah.
Well, this is Frank and Frank wishing to see you at the polls on November 5th, Tuesday, here in the auditorium between 6 and 8 o'clock. And we also encourage you that you can go and vote by mail. You can go down and see Nancy, the town clerk, and vote in her office. She would be glad to see you. But consider the candidates and consider the questions, the ballot questions that you will have an opportunity to express your opinion on. So we hope that you're in great health and having a great time in this election season. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.